Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer, and today we're here to talk about one of the best changes that's come to Civ 7 in the recent September update, and that is the new map generation. Now I know that I've done some fairly negative videos about Civ 7 lately, and truthfully, my overall thoughts about the game haven't changed with this new update. I mean, I have a whole 45-minute video about those negative thoughts if you want to hear the criticisms, but in this video, I'm going to try to be a little bit more positive about the game because map generation has been a huge complaint from the community, and I really think that with this new update, they've changed it in a really cool and unique way that definitely deserves to have some recognition. So first, let's start off by talking about the old map generation in Civ 7 and the problems with it. So a lot of people have previously complained about this. In Civ 7, basically every map was two large rectangles that were the main continents and then strips of islands in between them, and it was essentially the same every single game. You'd have these large vertical coastlines, the same groups of islands in the middle, and I think a reason for this was because of the restrictions of having distant lands in the game, because they needed to have a few islands that were separated by deep ocean from the player at the start, and because of that, they were pretty restricted on what they were able to do. And the way that these maps were generated in Civ 7 uses a method called fractal noise, also known as Perlin noise. They're not technically exactly the same, but they're essentially interchangeable. Fractal noise is a really common method that's been used to generate maps in many games, and it's been a standard for procedural generation for a long time. Like games like Factorio use fractal noise. I'm not going to go into the details of fractal noise in this video, but I'll include a link to a nice video about it in the description if you want to go check it out for yourself. But generally, fractal noise is a pretty great method for generating world maps in games. It has a lot of parameters that can be tuned to make it useful for tuning the look and feel of the entire map, and that's sort of what was called out in the recent map updates blog post that the Civ team did. Civ 7, however, has just added some new map types that use a totally different method to generate the map, and I really think it's very cool. I'm going to sort of nerd out in this video a little bit. For those of you who don't know, I'm an engineer in the real world, and I'm super excited about this new map generation technique because it uses a method that I've used in the engineering world to make meshes for computational fluid dynamics. So it's really cool to see these methods used in a different way in one of my favorite games. So the new maps in Civ 7 are called Continents and Islands and Pangaean Islands, and the old map generation algorithm is still in the game called Continents Plus and Pangaea Plus, but these new map types use a different technique that are known as Voronoi maps. And these maps are based off of something called Voronoi cells. So Voronoi cells are essentially regions where everything contained in that region is closest to a particular point in that region. So if we take a look at this diagram that I took from Wikipedia, we can see that if we draw a line between any 2 points, the cell boundary is exactly halfway between the 2 points. So anywhere in the light green cell is closest to the point that's contained within the light green cell. You can see that these tiles sort of look like tiles that you would see in a Civ game. So the Civ team has come up with something really cool based on this. So they start by generating some tectonic plates. So to do this, they randomly spray points onto a rectangle that will become the map. They start with fairly few points because the fewer points you have, the larger cells you will get. And if you want something like tectonic plates, which are quite large, you don't really need that much resolution. So they use these points to generate the Voronoi cell map based on the rules that I talked about. And then from there, they select a few starting cells to grow the tectonic plates from. Each region then grows one cell at a time, and they have some parameters that they use to control how the plates grow. And after every cell belongs to a tectonic plate, now you have a map that has your tectonic plates. So these plates provide a starting point for the growth of continents in the game later. So after making the tectonic plates, they then spray many more dots on the map to provide a higher resolution Voronoi map, and once again determine the Voronoi cells from those points. Similarly to what they did for the tectonic plates, they pick a few cells and start growing the continents from those cells. They then let them grow one cell at a time, following, once again, a set of parameters. So some of the parameters that they've mentioned here is like encouraging or discouraging growth along tectonic plate boundaries, preferring certain latitudes, or avoiding certain poles. So they can also use these rules to make sure that distant lands are still present in the game and that they're still separated from the main continents by deep ocean tiles. They also use similar rules to determine where to place features like mountains and coastlines and things like that. And then once again, like the tectonic plates, once the continents are all grown and every Voronoi cell belongs to a particular region, then you have your map. The last thing they do then is they overlay the Voronoi map with a hex map to generate the final map that gets used in the actual game. So this new generation technique makes maps that look much more organic and interesting, and obviously with the presence of all these parameters, they can continue to tune them in the future to provide even more map options. I personally would like to see something like large islands from Civ 5, where you have 3 to 4 medium-sized continents on the map with a bunch of little islands dotted around. Personally, I think think the best thing about this is that we no longer have the same two vertical blobs with a vertical line of islands down the middle and on the sides. Now we get much more varied continent shapes that are far more interesting and less predictable. Coastlines can be horizontal. They can be vertical, but they can also be horizontal. Maps aren't really super rectangular anymore. They can be, once again, depending on how random things get, but you can have a continent that's shaped like a U or the letter C, or maybe it's, wider at the top and more narrow at the bottom. You actually get islands of different sizes that are in much more random places. It's not just all the islands grouped in a single spot in the middle of the map. Now there's a lot more variety in where these islands are. Whatever team made these new map generation techniques at Firaxis really should be very proud, because they've managed to implement something that's innovative, uses a totally different method from what they were doing previously, and produces exactly what the players have been looking for. We get much more organic and much less predictable maps that are a lot more fun to explore. I don't even want to stop there though. Let's do a little thought experiment here. Perhaps for maybe Civ 8, let's take the map generation back a step to the point before we've overlaid the hex grid. You can see that with a Voronoi map like this, we still have essentially a set of tiles with clearly defined boundaries between them. So what if for the next Civ game we can get maps with tiles that aren't all the same? We could use these Voronoi maps as the actual Civ map. So you could have variable sizes of tiles, variable numbers of sides on each tile. You could do things like maybe larger tiles contain more yields, but in general they probably would also have more sides, so they're less defensible. You can be attacked from more sides. You could have more or less resolution of coastlines and navigable rivers. You could have mountain passes that are contained of small tiles that are, between large mountain tiles, things like that. Just in general, think of all the possibilities that could be had from doing something like this. I have no idea how hard that would be to implement in terms of, coding the game like that and balance and things like that, but man, if they could implement it and balance it, it could be really a huge change for the game and the Civ series in general, and really open up a ton of possibilities for the next Civ game. I would be shocked if they ever did that in something like Civ 7, because it sounds like such an overhaul that it would need its own game, but I'm really curious to see if they use this map generation technique to do anything cool like that in the future. Anyways, let me know what you think of Civ 7's new map generation in the comments section below. Thank you everyone for watching. I've been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for some more Civilization 7 content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.